Chapter 62, 40 Days and 40 Nights. You have heard of the concept of the 40 days and 40 nights, especially in the Bible, but also in some folklore. This concept is important in initiation rituals. The 40 days and 40 nights are not metaphorical, as some people claim who try to give it some esoteric meaning. This is a literal time period of initiation called the temptation. Every person who is being considered for a certain level of initiation here on earth will live through a time period lasting for 40 days, during which he or she will be tested or tempted, as it says in the Bible. It is an essential part of initiation, and no would-be initiate can continue to the next level if he or she does not pass the test. This test was famously passed by Jesus during the time when he spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness or in the mountain. The wilderness can indeed be a literal physical wilderness wherein the initiate to be spends time alone and is tested and tempted only in his or her mind using spiritual visions, as was the case with Jesus, or it can be a temporary condition of living that he or she endures for the set period of time until a decision is made as to whether he or she passed the test or not. As there are varying degrees and levels of knowledge, there are also varying levels of initiation. Those highly gifted people who are commonly called the chosen ones, such as the seven messiahs, do undergo a spiritual mental test involving visions while they are alone in a secluded place. Their minds are so much more developed over and above the minds of regular initiates that they are tested much more severely on the highest level. They are indeed well prepared for the more intense type of test, and it has never happened in all history that any of them has failed to pass the test. This level of testing that the seven messiahs underwent is very close to the level of initiatory experience that the ancients went through prior to 6,000 years ago. Although the depth and breadth of knowledge is not the same, the ancients had a total of 49,000 degrees of knowledge, whereas the highest initiation of this age is limited to only 360 degrees. Nevertheless, the intensity of the experience is very similar to what the ancients went through. Also, in ancient times, as it is today among the seven messiahs, no one in all history has ever failed the 40-day test. Such was the thoroughness and perfection of preparation that no person would be subjected to the test period if they were not 100% ready to pass it. In contrast to those perfect initiates, such as the seven messiahs and all the ancient gods, there are other initiates who are initiated on a lower level. Now, there are many among them who excel on this lower level to such an extent that at the end of their trial period, they come out being well nigh equal to the highest of initiates. Although they are not equal to the messiahs, they are so close that any differences, any shortfalls would be noticeable only to the highest of the high, such as their teachers, custodians, elders, and so on. Below this excellent group, who are only a step removed from the messianic initiates, there are many others who also pass the test well enough to be able to become highly qualified teachers, tribal elders, historians, healers, and such as are needed by their society. Then finally, below this third group of initiates, the last group that is able to pass the test are actually those who fail it. Such a one was the man known as Malcolm X. As I stated earlier, all would-be initiates below the level of the seven messiahs are tested under different circumstances. Their wilderness is not a place of seclusion where they are alone with nature in their minds, far away from common society. It takes place right in the middle of society, in circumstances that force them to make the same choices and decisions that high initiates have to make in seclusion. Their circumstances are such that they are never aware that they are in the 40-day trial period. In fact, many of them are tested before they are formally approached by a teacher, and as such are not conscious of the fact that they are potential initiates, although they are aware on a deeper level that they are living a life very similar to the life of initiation. Their whole life seems to be ordained to such a level that deep down they are aware that they're on a mission that is larger than of ordinary people. The life of Malcolm X is indeed a perfect example of a man on such a mission. As I said, there are many who have succumbed to the temptations of the devils and have failed the test. Indeed, the devils are used as the tempters of the initiates in this age. This is not a metaphorical statement. It is literal, meaning that the devils, the non blacks, are used by the powers that be to tempt the initiates and try everything in their power to sidetrack them, if not to completely turn them around. After Malcolm had lived his highly dramatic, intense life and was ready for the next stage, he was led by circumstances to enter into his trial period. The life of an initiate to be is not necessarily dramatic and intense, as was the case with Malcolm X. It can be an outwardly quiet seeming life, although the inner life is always intense. Every initiate to be experiences an intense inner life of spiritual questing, agony, and questioning at one time or another. That is what determines the intensity and readiness, not the outward circumstances that are visible to all. Malcolm's trial period began on the day he decided to enter the world of the white Muslims. This happened on his pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj. It started on Sunday, April 12, 1964, the day he announced at a rally that he was leaving for a trip abroad, and ended 40 days later on May 21st, the day he arrived back from his trip. The white Muslims were the devils who became his tempters and subsequently his conquerors. It was these very same devils who suggested to him that he should go on the pilgrimage. They rationalized that his views of white people as devils were myopic, in this sense that he had never been exposed to the true Muslims, those in Arabia, especially in Mecca. By going to Mecca, they said he would surely change his views. That thought percolated in his mind for some time until the events of his suspension from the Nation of Islam. At that point, instead of taking his suspension in stride for what it was, a test of his loyalty, his ego got the better of him. It was then that he decided to go on the pilgrimage to see for himself whether white people were devils or whether the whole thing was a lie fabricated by Elijah and Fard Muhammad. Now, the temptation during the 40-day trial takes on different forms for different people, depending on their circumstances. But there is one facet of it that is common to all trainees, and that is when the devil shows the trainee all the kingdoms and riches of the world and offers them to him. This is always the final temptation. And if the trainee succumbs to it, he fails the test. This happened to Malcolm when he met the man he calls Omar Azam, who showed him the riches of the kingdom of Arabia that totally awed Malcolm. His awe was great. As he said in his own words, he felt like he had never felt before in his life. He was in the presence of a relative of the ruler of Arabia and was totally awed by him. He said, I had never been so honored in my life. Not even the time he had met Elijah for the first time was that a greater honor, nor when he was promoted to be minister of a temple, nor even being graced by the very presence of the Messiah Fard Muhammad when he was in prison. None of that was greater honor than being in the presence of the royal devil, the ruler of one of the world's evil kingdoms. He reached a point of no return there, and then the devil had completed his conquest. Malcolm X thus failed miserably to proceed to the next stage of his initiation that would have catapulted the struggle of our people in America and all over the world to a new height. He set the movement back a few decades and increased the suffering of our people an estimable amount. All that happens on earth is preordained. To state the facts and conditions of initiation as I have done here concerning Malcolm X is not to condemn him. He acted out his preordained role that he himself preordained before he was born. The object of the test of initiation is not to test God, which of course the devil tries to do, meaning God the first self, but rather to test the personality of God that has incarnated as Malcolm. By this test and by failing it, he delivered unto himself and unto the Black nation the experience desired by all who took part in it. The only detriment, matters of choice, and the reality of preordination comes with the concept of time, wherein an individual's choice can either prolong or shorten our suffering. This is the only avenue where we as new personalities have a choice. We can act in such a way as to end our suffering today or extend it to the end of the age. Only the beginning and the end of the cycle is set in stone. as to when an individual or people decide to end their own suffering and that of others is our own personal choice. We can do it today and then see the rest of this age wind down to a close from a position of liberation, or we can prolong our suffering right to the last minute. It's all up to us. Black people have absolute free will, which takes effect prior to time. Into time, our incarnation is used to experience the life ordained by that free will. So we write our lives before we live them. Our existence is not an experiment, neither is it an evolution, spiritual or otherwise. We live to experience that which we already know. And since all knowledge is the glory of God, we live simply for the glory of God. Hence, our choices as Black people can neither be judged nor condemned. Every Black person will ultimately have his 40 days and 40 nights. Each will endure the trial, knowingly or unknowingly, to pass it or to fail. If he or she fails, then he or she will repeat it in Yahweh's heavens and pass it there. Then and only then does he or she become an initiate, a master of knowledge, and will see heaven's glories open up and the angels of God sing his or her praises.